Throne of Liberty has officially launched in Korea, and I've pretty much been playing it since it's dropped, so let me give you my first impressions of its final form, at least for its Korean release. Now, I want to talk about what this game is, not what it was in the main. In the past, it was initially designed to be an isometric MMO, but that has long since been changed, and of course we did have that sort of kerfuffle in May when there was the Korean beta test. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now first, when you actually log into the game, you can create your character. Now the character creator seems to be very nice. There's a lot of different options, there's a lot of different things that you can do in here. You can only play as humans though, so it's not like you're going to make any sort of insane alien big cat-eared elf lady or anything like that. It's all just humans, and there's a lot of sliders that you can tweak. Now personally, because I was rushing into this, I made one character where it was literally just the default character, and that's the character that I actually played through. But I also did a character where I simply uploaded my profile picture for this YouTube channel, and it made me look like this, which was fine. Probably more pretty in game than I am in real life, but you know, it looks decent. And I have to also say that the server launch was pretty damn flawless. I do believe some people are in a queue, but personally, I've not even seen a single queue. And it actually launched at 8 PM Korean time, pretty much peak time. And when I got into the game, there were a lot of people. Now I don't exactly know the server capacity. I believe they were talking about like 5,000, but I'm not actually sure of the number right now. But there were a lot of people, and as far as I know, there were no layers or anything like that. I think the way they did this was to basically just keep the render distance quite short, but overall I was very impressed. Now I said I didn't want to talk about what the game was in the main, but we pretty much have to talk about that May test and the reception that the game received in the West and I think even in Korea. Thankfully, the devs have listened and have pretty much changed this game in some very significant ways. There is no autoplay. The game does not play itself right now. There is no offline play, so you actually have to be there and your computer has to be on and you have to be playing the game. And the combat is much improved. You can now auto attack and move, which seems really simple, but definitely adds a layer to the game. One thing that they added that I didn't really expect is they added an action mode. Now personally, I found that it's actually easier and better to play in tab target, but I found that the action combat mode was more fun. The action camera mode is basically tab target, but your camera and your cursor become one, and you actually have to look at the enemy you want to attack. You can still press tab though to select something else. One key thing is that there is no left click to attack. Once you start attacking an enemy, the game will just auto attack it constantly. You're not actively participating. You just do your skills. However, there is an active block. The blocking is actually quite interesting. There is this sort of like purple indicator that tells you when to block, and if you do it well, you get like a perfect and you get a reward. You can block normal attacks as well, but there seems to be less reason to do that. I must give NCSoft credit here. They changed this game a lot in a short period of time. Now I believe that's actually because they had already had some of these changes and they already had some of this gameplay ready, but then they deliberately decided on what they released in May, and I have no idea why they would do such a thing. And then we come to something that we might find a little bit controversial here, is the combat in general. If I am honest, I think I have a personal preference or non-preference for tab target combat. If I'm honest, I find it a little bit old school. Now for some people, as this is basically like a taste thing, you might actually like a tab target MMO. It's pretty much been the default for many, many years. And I think you'll be okay with this gameplay and this combat. I find it to be old school and not in a good way. I'm more akin to like action MMOs, and I have to say I prefer action MMO combat. But not only that, I don't think the tab target is anything overly special. The active block I actually really enjoy. I think that's a great addition. But I don't like a couple of things that if you just like click on a mob, it will walk over to the mob to attack it for you. If I try and do a ranged ability but I'm out of range, what will happen is that your character will walk over to the enemy and get in melee ranged and never actually do the ability that you press. It just doesn't feel good to me, but for some of you, I'm pretty sure you will like it. And as I said, this is sort of like a taste thing. Do you like Pepsi? Do you like Coca-Cola? Do you like Roller Cola? Whatever it is, right? There's no way I can sort of tell you if this is good or bad, because I think it's going to come down to personal preference. So this, I think, is a good thing for some people, bad thing for others. Now, the combat is interesting because it does feature effectively a very similar system to New World. You have two weapons and you can sort of freely choose whatever you want. There is no classes. You sort of pick your weapons and you pick your stats and you pick your skills and you go ahead. You have 2 weapons and you can pick 12 skills from any of those combinations. Now the way that it works is if you're actually holding a greatsword but you've got daggers in your offhand and you do a dagger skill, you instantly switch to the dagger to do the skill and then it instantly switches you back to the greatsword. I like this system, I like it in New World, I like it here, I think it's quite good. Now the weapons are these: there's sword and shield, greatsword, daggers, crossbow, longbow, a wand and tome, and a staff. Now the wand and tome is weirdly the healing weapon, and the sword and shield is the tanking weapon, and this game does feature the Holy Trinity. Now one thing that I think we can probably universally say is that the game is very pretty, the world is beautiful. Now I was playing mostly on low or medium because I was having some issues with streaming this game. Most people weren't, by the way, so I don't think this is a game thing. I think this is a my terrible computer thing, but nonetheless. But even in low and medium, this game looks sensational. The lighting is nice. It is in Unreal Engine 4, so maybe that's to be expected, but it is truly beautiful. And the world, for me, is actually probably the special thing in this game, if there is one. Now the map size isn't actually that big, the playable area isn't that big, but I believe a second zone and possibly a level increase is coming in about 4 months, so that will be exciting to see. The max level for anybody curious is level 50 and I'm currently level 28. But yeah, the world is great, the graphics are good, it's a very seamless world. Even the teleporting from one area to another has a very brief sort of like warping effect, and it's very quick. The weather is nice and the weather changes, there's a day-night cycle, all truly beautiful. And as I said, the world is its special thing, and in this special thing there are these events. Now these events are each sort of sub-region of the main area has these scheduled timed events. Now these can be collecting wolves' tails, killing goblins, whatever it is. And there's basically 2 variations of this. There's a solo mode where it's all PvE, nobody kills anybody, it's just who can collect the most. I think there might be a guild mode where there isn't PvP, but if I'm honest, I haven't actually seen that, so I'm not sure about that. But there is definitely a PvP version of this that is scheduled. You're not going to be surprised, it's going to be something that's sort of more akin to being opting into this, and you can see a schedule in the scheduler and you will see that it's going to go PvP, and that means you can get with your guild and your allies and go and kill people, and you know, if somebody's been killing wolves, you kill them and you get those wolves' tails and then you hand them in. Those world events are really this game's thing. It's probably the best thing about this game, and it really makes the world sort of shine. And in the world there's a lot of mob variety, and I've been very sort of happy with that system. Another system that I think is quite nice is the guild system and the guild content. There's quite a few layers to this. There's basically these guild quests that you can do where you contribute and you get rewards, and you can sort of donate and have like a whole ranking up system. There's a guild hall, which basically everybody has the same one, so the different guilds have the same one, but you can go in there and there's guild vendors and there's guild ranks and there's all this kind of very intricate system with the guild system. I'm just a pleb in a guild at the minute, so I can't really speak about the running of a guild, but it looks very interesting, and I think a lot of organised groups who pre-exist will have a lot of fun with that system. One thing it has with the guild as well is in the guild hall there is this sort of like portal where there are these guild raids, and the lowest level starts at level 24, so this is something you can do as you level. Now personally, I did not find the first boss to be that mechanically interesting. It had a system where you had to hide behind a pillar and these circles on the ground, but it wasn't really very challenging. A lot of the time you just stood still, pressing your buttons and then hiding behind a pillar. Nothing really crazy or overly exciting in my opinion. One weird quirk is that there doesn't appear to be any actual raid groups. The group size is 6, and you can have more than that in the guild room, but it's just whoever walks in there. I don't know if there's a max size, probably maybe all of the guild, I'm not 100% sure about that. And I think the bosses probably scale, but again, it's not really written down anywhere, it's hard to say. Now the game's UI actually has an English option, which is what I was playing in, but keep in mind, this isn't the global release, this was just the Korean release, so maybe some of the text isn't overly as understandable as I would maybe like. Now one thing that a lot of people are interested in, and I have to confess maybe not myself, is the story. The story seems to be very well told and very effectively told. There are some quality cutscenes, there are 3D cinematics and 2D cinematics, both of which I think work very nicely and are quite pretty. The story itself I won't spoil, but I've not really been following it, so I'm not going to talk about the quality of the story itself, more that the storytelling is told well and presented well. The voices were in Korean, so that's why I didn't actually pay attention. Now, I personally think that the UI is very nice, and actually it can be customized to a very high degree. You can shrink boxes, move them wherever you like. I think it's pretty good. Now, in the UI, one thing I would say that is maybe not so good is the menus. There's so many different menus that I'm going to talk about in a moment. As for content, one extra thing that they have is a solo PvE tower. I'm sure some other games have this. In fact, I'm pretty sure if you are a Lineage 2 player, you'll probably have this and probably other things similar like the Astrolite system that appears to be giving you extra damage and that kind of thing, which I'm not going to fully explain here, but you know, you will notice similarities. But this PvE tower is basically a sequence that you do. You start off at level 1, you defeat the boss, and then you go on to the next level. And the bosses get harder and they level up, so you know, you need to level up as it goes. And it's a fun 1v1 challenge basically. The good thing about that is that the difficulty is controlled and then the rewards can be quite valuable. For your character, there appears to be transmog because I think there's like these skins that you can buy. So I'm guessing there is a transmog. Obviously, I'm playing this as a free-to-play player, so I didn't really see it. And I've also seen the possibility of dyes. So it looks like there's going to be a lot of ways to customize how your character actually looks beyond just the initial character customization, which, by the way, you can redo later on for a paid token, I believe. Now, moving on to the things that I didn't enjoy as much, I'm going to repeat some of this because I just mentioned tab target combat. As I said, I didn't personally gel well with this tab target combat. I know it's sort of very Lineage 2, I know it's sort of very Korean, but for me, I just did not like it. Not being able to left click your attacks, not being able to do abilities that miss, I just didn't like it. So much that it might even be the deal breaker for me. I like the fact that there's a block, but it's not exactly the most revolutionary combat that I've ever seen. I think that's going to be very Marmite, and it's hard for me to say what you enjoy versus what you don't enjoy. Now, one thing that I think a lot of people aren't going to enjoy is that there is simply no trade skills. There are no professions. There is crafting and gathering, but it's not like you level up your weaponsmithing or your skinning or anything like that. That just does not exist as far as I can see. Everything can be gathered by everybody, and it's not instant, so if you take it, somebody else can not get it until they either respawn or they get a different one. And the crafting, I think, is intended so that you'll actually craft the same thing multiple times. So that'll be a way that you can level them up and get traits from the same one. It's all a little bit convoluted, but we'll talk about that in a second. But the lack of trade skills means for a lot of people, the PvE is going to feel a little bit empty because they like the idea that they are the best weaponsmith on the server. They are the person who crafts the best greatswords. And for a lot of people, that will be a massive turnoff. And for me, it sort of implies that the game might be a little bit shallow. However, I'm way too early to make that statement right now. The way that crafting works is that in each main town, there are different types of crafters that you have to go to craft. So there's an armor crafter, a weapon crafter, a jewel crafter, and I think a sundries crafter and a spellbook crafter. Each of these require various different materials. And you get these from doing a variety of different things. Mainly, I think you will get these from doing contracts. The contracts are in each town, and they don't give you XP, but they do give you items that I think you will generally use to craft. But you get crafting materials from doing the guild stuff, and just everything in the game basically seems to reward you. It's pretty damn crazy. So crafting is simply a case of having the materials. But then there is gear enchanting as well, which is the process of leveling up your gear. You might have a green helm, and if you have the corresponding armor growth stones, then you can enchant it for a cost of so many growth stones and some gold. Gold in this game is called solent. Now, the enchanting is okay, and what I mean by that is there appears to be no destruction. You always succeed. You just succeed in a different amount. So at the start, you might have a 40% chance of getting 35% to the next level. You might have a 30% chance of getting 45% to the next level, a 20% chance to getting X percentage, and then you have maybe like a 10% chance to get the whole level. But the key thing is you always get some progress. However, it does get harder as you go up. So for example, a grey item is easier to level than a green item, and a blue item will be harder to level than a green item. You can also convert this. So let's say you've leveled up one armor piece that is your helm, but you've actually got a new green helm which you want to wear, you can sort of just transfer that. I think there's a little bit of a financial cost there and maybe a loss of percentage, but I'm not 100% sure about that. The gear enchanting system seems interesting, doesn't seem anything crazy there. Not awful system, I would say. It's just the lack of the fact that there is no actual trade skills in this game, which is a little bit confusing. One thing that I personally didn't enjoy is that there are these morphs instead of having a mount, so you instantly teleport into basically like a wolf or whatever skin you have, and that's how you effectively sprint and move through the world. Now for me, this whole thing was a little bit janky just in terms of its movement, I think possibly because of the VPN, but conceptually I would have just preferred to have mounts. They don't appear to have much value. And there are also these pets, which I think they're called toys or something like that. I keep calling them amiibos because it's just easy for my brain. But these are effectively just a little creature that follows you. You cannot disable yours, like you have to have one, I think. But I have turned off everybody else's because it just clutters up the screen. Personally, I find both of those things to be very meh. I don't really see the point in them. I don't really care about them. Not very interesting in my opinion. Now, one thing that's a little bit hard to explain, because actually it's quite hard to understand, is that there are a lot of systems in this game. There's a lot of reward tracks and it's quite confusing. There is a reward track just for leveling up, which you can buy a premium version for extra rewards. There are reward systems for if you add items into this codex, or I think it's called an appendix, and then you can get extra rewards by adding in 3 items of different types. You like claim a reward that way. There's a login reward. There's a reward if you log in from a PC bong in Korea. There's an actual battle pass with a free battle pass and a paid battle pass. There's like a whole server wide codex as well. There's guild rewards. Honestly, there are a lot of systems. There's gear enchanting, there's gear crafting, which you have multiple, which you then transfer the traits. It's quite confusing, and this isn't really a guide to those systems, so I'm not going to really explain how they work in detail. What I will say is that the reward system is a little bit confusing. Now, all of these systems, all of these reward systems, basically open up the gate to the possibility that this game will have pay to win. Now we will mention pay to win a little bit more, but I think this obfuscated system is designed that if they do ever add pay to win, it won't be immediately noticeable. And in fact, it's hard for me after playing this amount of time to say if this game will be full on pay to win. I think it probably will be, but it's hard to prove and it's hard to know why, because I think it's deliberately confusing. There are different kinds of stores, so I mentioned the battle pass and that kind of thing. There's Lottie's Star Shop, which appears to let you buy various things like just buying the solent and the gold, as well as buying something that if you die, you don't actually get the 5% XP hit that you normally would. There's another shop as well, which appears to not be working right now. So it's very hard to say what is and what isn't going to be pay to win in this game. I think we'll only know when people start hitting the end game. However, all signs point to there will be an element of pay to win. And the most obvious example of that is simply the marketplace. So the marketplace in this game is only a paid currency. I think the paid currency is called Lucent. So what this is, you can open up the marketplace once you hit level 15, and effectively people are selling bind on equip items. Now it's not every item in the game, because I believe that some of the better actual gear will come from dungeons and actual content, according to the game director. So I think it's effectively just selling the bind on equip items, and they're not the best gear, but there are sort of materials that you can buy as well. And if there's ever going to be an accusation of pay to win, this is the thing that's going to get memed. This is the one that people are going to instantly look at and be instantly turned off. I personally think it's designed to be more akin to like World of Warcraft, where yes, you can buy gold in that game, but you don't get the best gear because the best gear is actually from content. I think the idea is the same here, but it's not going to appear that way. This will be laughed at. However, one advantage to this is I don't see how this game will have any RMT, real money transactions, because this game doesn't feature any player-to-player trading that is direct. You can only really do it through this marketplace. So I don't think the game will be swarmed with bots, although I think bots might find a way somehow by, you know, maybe selling something for lower than they should that, you know, they've farmed or what have you. But I don't think it's going to be a huge concern. No need for RMT when the game itself offers you RMT. However, with this pay to win talk, we need to see it at the end game before I can make any firm comments on it. So I'll leave it there for now. Now, one thing I mentioned about combat before, one thing I didn't like about the combat was the PvP. Anything other than small scale combat, I think it's going to be very cluttered and very chaotic. Basically, I think everybody's going to be zerging around. It's difficult to identify who your teammates are versus the enemies, and it's difficult to track down who your whole guild is trying to target because you can only look at your party leader's target. I don't think there will be much PvP beyond a zerg. There appears to be no reason not to zerg, so I think people will simply do that. And one interesting thing is the level difference in PvP is very important. A level 20 trying to kill a level 40 is next to impossible. Now some people will be happy with that, but what it basically means is once you fall behind the hardcore players, there's no point PvPing until you get to level 50, and then it will balance out a little bit, I guess. So I didn't enjoy the combat, nor did I enjoy the PvP, and that for me was sort of the deal breaker in general. But maybe you won't have that issue. There were also some little things that weren't necessarily game breaking, but I just didn't like. One example is that there are these rare mobs. The first one I came across was this giant goblin butcher, and oh my god, I could not find this guy anywhere. Well, actually that's a lie. I once found him, by the time I got to him he was already dead. Now apparently these were spawning once every 20 or 30 minutes, and you need these for the side quests, and honestly it was toxic. I just really did not like running about looking for these guys. And one other thing that I really didn't enjoy with the camera, when I was holding right mouse button to turn the screen, which you do in like World of Warcraft and other things like that, if you have any little pop-ups of a dialogue in the corner, either from your little amiibo, whatever it's called, or somebody giving you just general information in the area, it stops you being able to move the camera. I don't know why. It's stupid. It doesn't happen in the action combat, but I wasn't using that. One thing that I did experience, which I don't want to say is a huge issue, is that when there was an open world boss, I got insane amount of lag. Like I was literally getting 1 frame every 2 or 3 seconds. Now that could be the VPN, and actually somebody told me that they went and did the boss later and they had no lag and it was fixed, so I don't know what's going on with that. But there is definitely a question about what will happen if there's literally hundreds and hundreds of people in a very small area. One major thing that I personally didn't like is the questing. Whilst the story is told very well, very competently, the quests seemed very old school again. A lot of it was just go here and press F on this thing. Some of it was actually time gated, so you have to go and speak to somebody when it's raining or when it's nighttime. That just feels stupid. And overall, the leveling just feels quite slow and a little bit unclear because the journal is just not very well laid out. In theory, you can actually see where somebody spawns. In practice, it's just a bit messy and a bit unclear. But keep in mind, actually, I know a lot of people say that in MMOs that it's the journey that matters. For me, it's not the journey, it's the end game. I don't really like leveling, and questing is pretty much the same in a lot of MMOs, so I don't really get too hung up on this one, but worth keeping in mind. Now when it comes to content, I sort of mentioned how I didn't really enjoy the guild raid. There is also these open world dungeons where it's an elite area that you go in and you get XP and you get extra rewards and stuff like that. The guild that I was in, we basically went in, zerged it, not really a challenge, not really that interesting if I'm honest. The more interesting thing there is that it's PvE in the daytime and PvP at nighttime, but it's daytime and therefore PvE for about 2 hours I think, and PvP for like half an hour, so not really a big issue there. The bad for me is a little bit hard to summarize, but I would say that the game feels competent, but it doesn't really have any heart or soul. It doesn't have anything that I feel is overly unique. There's nothing special here. There's nothing to really strongly dislike, but there's also nothing to love. And for me, that just feels flat. The whole game just ends up feeling a little bit flat. Now, will that change at endgame? I'm not sure. So there's a couple of things that I actually just don't know about. For example, the sieging PvP, that's not in the game, and I think that will have a lot of potential. If there's no lag in those big massive fights, this could be where the game shines, and I've not experienced that yet, so just keep that in mind as well. I've also not experienced the 6-person dungeons. I think you get to do them at level 30, so I'm not a million miles away from them. I've been told that the mechanics aren't super interesting, but you know, maybe that's again just the starter dungeon. I'm pretty sure they could expand on that if they wanted. I also think that there might end up being some progression a little bit sooner. So as I mentioned, there's like a whole new region coming in about 4 months. I think we're going to get a new weapon then, and I also think that the level might be increased. So it's level 50 right now, but if you actually go on the leveling milestones, it says 51 is coming soon. And one thing we also don't know is simply there is no Western date. There's no announcement right now from Amazon Game Studios when this game will hit the global audience. I sort of suspect they might do like a beta weekend, but I'm just speculating there. We absolutely don't know anything. So let me try and summarize this with the good and the bad. The world and the character customization, sensational, all very nice there. The combat, you're either going to think is good or bad depending on your preference. The guild system is very nice, I really enjoyed that. And actually the overall content that this game offers is quite nice. You've got these world events, guild raids, open world bosses. Yeah, there's a lot of content there. The story seems to be well told, and the developers are actively listening, which is very important. Now for the bad, for me, I would put the tab target feels old school here, but again, you might like it. The no trade skill thing I think is going to be very important for a lot of players. The potential of pay to win is very high, even though I can't quite answer if it is or if it isn't yet. I think the answer will be yes, but it's just a question of what degree. Sadly, I think the PvP is going to be a little bit too cluttered, although you could put this in the combat category. I think the questing is a little bit underwhelming, and the game just seems to lack something special. It almost feels like an AI made the game because it doesn't have the heart or the soul, the something that would make you fall in love with this game. And that for me is really the deal breaker. The unknowns are simply going to be the PvP sieges, that could be exciting, 6-person dungeons, the upcoming progression and the rate of that, like is it going to be vertical, horizontal? I don't really know yet. And indeed, when is this game actually coming out in the West? I'm not 100% sure that I'm going to keep playing it. I don't necessarily think it's to my taste. I think if you're like a Lineage 2 player or you're just simply desperate for an MMO right now, this might be the one for you. Honestly, in my own head right now, I'm thinking, do I even like tab target MMOs in the year 2023, 2024? I'm just not sure I do. I think I'm pretty much a action combat enjoyer, and I don't think I quite realised that about myself just yet, but now I do. Have you been watching this game on Twitch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I will probably not be streaming this game on Twitch, but there is a link to my Twitch in the description. If you want to come and talk about it, make sure you check me out there. Other than that, a big shout out to my Patreons. You guys really help me. And if you want to support me, if you're listening to this and you're not a Patreon, then do consider doing so. That would really, really help me out. Definitely though, have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.